The brass bell above Meridian's entrance chimed as Elena Torres pushed through the heavy door, her daughter's hand gripped so tightly in hers that both their knuckles had gone white. The gallery was having its opening night, champagne flutes catching light from crystal fixtures overhead, laughter spilling from clusters of well-dressed patrons admiring abstract paintings that cost more than most people owned in years. The polished concrete floors reflected everything like dark water, doubling the crowd, making the space feel more crowded than it was. Elena didn't belong here. Her server uniform from the diner still clung to her, smelling faintly of coffee and grease despite the rain that had soaked through her jacket during the run across downtown Seattle. Her sneakers squeaked against the expensive flooring, drawing glances from people whose shoes probably cost what she made in a month. But none of that mattered. Only Sophie mattered. Only getting her daughter somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses, somewhere the man following them might hesitate before doing what Elena had seen in his eyes. Sophie was 6 years old, her dark curls plastered to her forehead from the rain, her princess backpack bouncing against her small shoulders as they moved deeper into the gallery. She hadn't spoken since they left the apartment, hadn't asked why they were running, hadn't cried even though Elena knew she was terrified. Sometimes children understood danger before adults explained it. Sometimes fear needed no translation. The gallery owner, a thin woman in black with severe glasses, started toward them with the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile at all. The expression people wore when they wanted you to leave but were too polite to say it directly. Elena's stomach twisted, panic rising like bile. They needed to stay here. They needed these people, this light, these witnesses. But before the woman could reach them, before she could suggest they might be more comfortable elsewhere, a voice cut through the ambient noise of the opening. Elena. She turned. Marcus Reeves stood near a massive painting of shattered mirrors, a glass of wine untouched in his hand. He looked exactly as he had 12 years ago when they'd been in college together, before life had pulled them in different directions. Tall, with dark skin and careful eyes that missed nothing, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her car was worth. He'd been studying architecture then, talking about buildings that could change how people lived, sketching designs in margins of textbooks during lectures they should have been paying attention to. He was looking at her now with those same careful eyes, taking in her wet clothes, her terrified daughter, the way she kept glancing toward the entrance as if expecting something terrible to follow her through it. Marcus, she managed, her voice cracking on his name. He crossed the space between them in 4 long strides, his expression shifting from surprise into something harder, more focused. What happened? The question was quiet, meant only for her, but it carried weight. Not the idle curiosity of someone making conversation, but the genuine concern of someone prepared to act on whatever answer she gave. I don't know if you remember my daughter, Sophie, Elena said, the words tumbling out too fast. She's in 1st grade now. We were walking home from her school and there was a man. He followed us for 6 blocks. I tried to lose him but he stayed with us, always half a block behind, and when I finally turned to look at him directly he smiled. Marcus, he smiled like he wanted me to know he was following us. Sophie pressed closer to her mother's leg, her face buried in Elena's hip. Her whole body was trembling. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. He glanced toward the entrance, then back to Elena. Did he follow you inside? I don't know. I didn't look back after we came in. I was afraid if I looked, if he knew I'd seen him, her voice broke. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Stay here, Marcus said. He handed his wine glass to a passing server without looking at them, his attention already moving across the gallery, cataloguing exits and angles, doing calculations Elena couldn't follow. Don't move. Don't go near the windows. He walked toward the entrance, not hurried, nothing in his movement suggesting alarm. Just a man stepping out for air, for a phone call, for any of a dozen innocent reasons. But Elena had known him when they were younger, had seen him break up fights without throwing a punch, had watched him navigate situations that should have turned violent with nothing but words and presence. She'd forgotten that about him until just now. Forgotten what it felt like to watch him move with that particular kind of purpose. The gallery owner had paused, sensing something in the air had changed, her customer service smile faltering into genuine uncertainty. Other patrons continued their conversations, oblivious, discussing brushwork and negative space while sipping wine that cost more per bottle than Elena made in a week. Marcus returned after 90 seconds that felt like 90 minutes. His expression was carefully neutral, which somehow made Elena more afraid than if he'd looked concerned. "There's a man across the street," he said quietly, crouching down so he could speak to her without others overhearing. "Navy jacket, jeans, brown boots. He's standing under the awning of the coffee shop, watching this entrance. Does that match who was following you?" Elena's breath caught. "Yes. That's him." Sophie made a small sound against her mother's leg, something between a whimper and a gasp. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He pulled his phone from his pocket, typed something quickly, then looked at Elena with an expression that managed to be both gentle and absolutely serious. "I need you to tell me everything. When did you first notice him?" "Outside Sophie's school. He was standing by the playground fence when I picked her up. I didn't think anything of it at first, parents wait there all the time, but then when we started walking home he started walking too. Same direction, same speed, always keeping that distance. I turned down a side street we never use, thinking maybe it was coincidence, but he turned too. Then I cut through the grocery store parking lot and he followed us through. That's when I knew." "Did he say anything? Try to approach you directly?" "No. He just followed. And smiled. When I finally stopped and looked at him, he smiled like he knew something I didn't." Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, typed a response, then looked back at Elena. "I have people coming. They'll make sure you get somewhere safe." People. Elena's mind was racing, trying to understand what was happening, what resources college architecture students turned into that let them summon help with a text message. "Marcus, what do you do now?" He stood, and for the first time since college she saw something in his expression that made her understand why the gallery owner had backed away when he'd crossed the room. Something that suggested the careful student who'd sketched buildings in margins had become someone very different. "I solve problems," he said simply. The brass bell chimed. Elena's whole body went rigid, her hand tightening on Sophie's shoulder. But it wasn't the man from across the street. It was a woman, mid-30s, in casual clothes that looked expensive despite their simplicity. She scanned the gallery with professional efficiency before her eyes landed on Marcus and she gave a barely perceptible nod. Two more people entered behind her. A man built like he'd played professional football, and another woman who looked like she could have been anyone's suburban aunt. They dispersed through the gallery naturally, becoming part of the crowd, but Elena noticed they positioned themselves near exits, near windows, creating a perimeter that wasn't obvious unless you knew to look for it. "Who are they?" Elena whispered. "Security. Mine." Marcus's attention was still on the street, visible through the gallery's floor-to-ceiling windows. The man across the street just made a phone call. He's waiting for something. Probably backup or instructions. The casual way he said it, like he was discussing weather patterns, made Elena's stomach drop. "Marcus, should we call the police?" "Already done. They're 3 minutes out." He glanced down at Sophie, his expression softening slightly. "Hey, Sophie. I'm Marcus, an old friend of your mom's from school. I know things are scary right now, but I need you to be brave a little longer. Can you do that?" Sophie nodded against her mother's leg, not lifting her face, but acknowledging him. "Good. Your mom did exactly the right thing bringing you here. Sometimes when bad things happen, the smartest move is to find people who can help." He looked at Elena. "Tell me about the last few weeks. Anything unusual? Anyone paying too much attention? Strange cars in your neighborhood?" Elena's mind raced backward, sorting through recent memory for details she might have dismissed as paranoia. There was a car. Dark sedan, I don't know the make. I saw it parked near our apartment building 3 times last week. Different times of day, but always in the same spot across the street. I thought maybe someone who lived nearby got a new car, but now. License plate. I didn't get it. I wasn't thinking, Marcus, what is this? Who is that man? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed again. He read whatever message appeared, his expression hardening into something that made the gallery suddenly feel colder despite the crowd and the warm lighting. The man across the street is named David Chen. He's been flagged in connection with 3 open investigations involving child abductions in the Pacific Northwest. Seattle PD has been looking for him for 2 months. Marcus's voice was quiet, clinical, delivering information that should have been accompanied by sirens and emergency broadcasts. He works with at least 2 other individuals. They target single mothers, follow them, learn their routines, wait for opportunities. Elena's vision blurred. Her knees went weak and she would have fallen if Marcus hadn't caught her elbow, steadying her with grip that was firm but careful. "Mom." Sophie's voice was tiny, muffled against her leg. "I'm okay, baby," Elena managed, though her voice shook. "I'm okay." Marcus guided her to a bench against the wall, away from the windows, his security team adjusting positions to maintain their invisible perimeter. The gallery patrons continued their conversations, completely unaware that something terrible was unfolding in their presence, hidden in plain sight like secrets painted over with expensive art. "Why us?" Elena whispered. "Why Sophie? It's not personal. It's never personal to people like him. You're a target of opportunity. Single mother, probably no family nearby to notice quickly if something happened, routine that's predictable. He's been watching, learning your patterns, waiting for the right moment." Marcus spoke with the flat certainty of someone who'd seen this before, who understood predators and their hunting strategies. But he made a mistake tonight. He got impatient or sloppy, let you see him too clearly, and you did exactly what you should have done. You ran toward people, toward witnesses, toward help. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Elena saw relief flash across Marcus's face before he suppressed it back into careful neutrality. "Seattle PD is 30 seconds out. When they arrive, you're going to tell them everything you told me. Describe Chen, the car you've been seeing, every detail you can remember. They'll want to move you to a safe location while they process the scene and pick him up." "He's still out there," Elena said, her voice hollow. "Across the street, just standing there." "Not for long." Marcus's phone buzzed again. He read it, then looked at her with something that might have been satisfaction. "He just tried to leave. My people are keeping him in place without being obvious about it. The police will have him in custody in approximately 15 seconds. Through the window, Elena saw what looked like a casual interaction. The man in the navy jacket trying to walk away, one of Marcus's security team apparently bumping into him by accident, apologizing, creating a momentary delay. Another member of the team appearing on his other side, boxing him in without seeming to, their positions looking natural until you understood what you were seeing. Then the police cars arrived, lights painting the street in blue and red, officers emerging with hands on weapons. The man in the navy jacket tried to run but made it less than 10 feet before he was on the ground, hands being cuffed behind his back, rights being read in voices Elena couldn't hear through the glass but could imagine. Sophie lifted her face from her mother's leg for the first time, watching through the window with wide eyes. "Is he the bad man?" "Yes, baby," Elena said softly. "But the police have him now. He can't hurt us." Marcus's phone buzzed continuously, information flowing in from sources Elena couldn't identify. His expression cycled through several configurations as he read, each message apparently adding pieces to a puzzle he was assembling in real time. "There's a second vehicle 2 blocks away. Gray van, Washington plates. 2 occupants matching descriptions of Chen's known associates." He was already moving, typing responses, coordinating with people Elena couldn't see. "SPD is moving to intercept now." The gallery owner had finally noticed the police activity outside, her professional composure cracking into genuine alarm. Other patrons were crowding the windows, pointing, speculating, their art opening transformed into something much more interesting than abstract paintings. A detective entered the gallery, shield clipped to her belt, scanning the room until her eyes found Marcus and then Elena. She crossed to them directly, and Elena saw recognition pass between her and Marcus, some unspoken communication that suggested they'd worked together before. "Ms. Torres," the detective said, her voice carrying authority that made people step back automatically. "I'm Detective Sarah Kim. I need to take your statement about David Chen and the events leading to tonight. Mr. Reeves has filled me in on the basics, but I'll need details for the arrest report." Elena nodded numbly, her hand finding Sophie's head, stroking her daughter's hair with fingers that trembled despite her efforts at control. "There's more," Marcus said quietly, his attention on his phone. "The gray van tried to run. They made it 3 blocks before SPD boxed them in. Both suspects in custody, vehicle being towed for forensic analysis." Detective Kim's expression hardened with something that might have been satisfaction. 3 for 3. That's the whole cell we've been tracking. Cell. Elena looked between them, understanding growing like ice in her stomach. How many people were involved in this? Chen and his 2 associates have been operating in Seattle for approximately 8 months, Kim explained, her voice gentle despite the horror of what she was describing. They are linked to 4 confirmed abductions and 3 attempted abductions that we know of. You and Sophie would have been their next targets if you hadn't gotten away tonight. The words hit Elena like physical blows. 4 confirmed abductions. Children taken, families destroyed, because she and Sophie had been lucky enough to run, lucky enough to stumble into this gallery, lucky enough that Marcus had been here. The other children, Elena managed. The ones who were taken. Did you find them? Kim's expression went carefully neutral, the kind of professional mask that police wore when they couldn't give the answer anyone wanted to hear. That's part of an ongoing investigation. I can't discuss details, but recovering these suspects means we have new leads we didn't have before. It wasn't an answer. It was a careful non-answer that suggested things too terrible to say out loud in front of a 6-year-old girl. Sophie had gone very quiet, processing things children shouldn't have to process, learning truths about the world that Elena would have given anything to keep from her a few more years. The gallery had emptied of patrons, art forgotten in favor of police drama playing out in real time. Only Marcus's security team remained, still maintaining their positions despite the official law enforcement presence. Backup that wasn't officially requested but appeared anyway. We'll need you to come to the station for a formal statement, Kim said. It'll take a few hours, and we'll have victim services counselors available for Sophie. We'll also need to arrange safe housing while we process the scene at your apartment and make sure there aren't any additional threats we haven't identified. Safe housing. Elena's mind struggled to keep up with implications that kept expanding. For how long? Minimum 48 hours while we clear your apartment and ensure no other members of this network are active in Seattle. Probably longer. These cases have connections across multiple jurisdictions. Kim glanced at Marcus, some unspoken communication passing between them. Mr. Reeves has offered to help facilitate secure accommodations if that's acceptable to you. Elena looked at Marcus, seeing the college student she'd known 12 years ago overlaid with this stranger who commanded security teams and coordinated with detectives like they were old colleagues. What exactly do you do now, Marcus? He met her eyes with expression that carried weight she couldn't quite interpret. I run a private security firm. We handle situations that fall between legal cracks, that require resources and discretion most people don't have access to. Corporate protection mostly, executives, diplomats, high-value targets. But occasionally we help with situations like yours. Why? The question emerged before Elena could stop it. Why help us? We haven't seen each other in 12 years. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, becoming more human, less professional. Because 12 years ago you helped me pass structural engineering when I was failing, spent hours tutoring me even though you were barely keeping up with your own coursework. You never asked for anything in return, never made me feel like I owed you. You just helped because that's who you are. He glanced at Sophie, then back to Elena. And because no child should have to be afraid walking home from school. No mother should have to run through Seattle in the rain hoping she can find somewhere safe before a predator catches up. The brass bell chimed again. More police entering, crime scene techs with equipment cases, the machinery of investigation grinding into motion. Kim touched Elena's arm gently, guiding her toward the door. I'll drive you to the station, Marcus said, falling into step beside them. My people will secure your apartment, pack anything you and Sophie need for the next few days. You won't have to go back there until it's safe. Sophie's hand found Marcus's, her small fingers wrapping around his with trust that Elena wouldn't have believed possible an hour ago. Sometimes children understood safety the way they understood danger, instinctively recognizing protection when it appeared. Outside, the rain had stopped. Seattle streets gleamed black under streetlights, reflections painting everything twice. The man in the navy jacket was being loaded into a police car, his head forced down by a cop's hand, his expensive watch catching light as he disappeared into the backseat. Elena watched him go, this stranger who'd been planning to destroy her life, to take her daughter, to add them to a list of victims whose faces she'd probably seen on the news without ever imagining she'd nearly joined them. You're safe now, Marcus said quietly. Both of you. Elena nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Sophie leaned against her, exhausted, traumatized, but alive and whole and heading toward help instead of horror. The investigation would take months. Chen and his associates connected to a network spanning 3 states, dozens of potential victims identified through evidence seized from their vehicles and properties. Elena and Sophie would testify at multiple trials, would spend countless hours with counselors and prosecutors, would rebuild their sense of safety piece by careful piece. But that night, standing outside Meridian Gallery while Seattle's finest processed a crime scene that almost included her daughter, Elena felt something shift. Not relief exactly. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of understanding that they'd survived something that destroyed other families, that her split-second decision to run toward people instead of home had saved both their lives. Marcus's security team materialized around them, creating a corridor through the police activity, guiding them toward an SUV with tinted windows that looked like every other expensive vehicle in Seattle but probably wasn't. "Thank you," Elena managed. 2 words that couldn't possibly contain what she meant, what she felt, the magnitude of debt that had nothing to do with money or obligation and everything to do with the fact that her daughter was still hers. Marcus opened the SUV door, his expression carrying understanding that didn't need elaboration. That's what friends are for. Even ones who haven't seen each other in 12 years. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, becoming more human, less professional. "Because 12 years ago you helped me pass structural engineering when I was failing, spent hours tutoring me even though you were barely keeping up with your own coursework. You never asked for anything in return, never made me feel like I owed you. You just helped because that's who you are." He glanced at Sophie, then back to Elena. "And because no child should have to be afraid walking home from school. No mother should have to run through Seattle in the rain hoping she can find somewhere safe before a predator catches up." The brass bell chimed again. More police entering, crime scene techs with equipment cases, the machinery of investigation grinding into motion. Kim touched Elena's arm gently, guiding her toward the door. "I'll drive you to the station," Marcus said, falling into step beside them. "My people will secure your apartment, pack anything you and Sophie need for the next few days. You won't have to go back there until it's safe." Sophie's hand found Marcus's, her small fingers wrapping around his with trust that Elena wouldn't have believed possible an hour ago. Sometimes children understood safety the way they understood danger, instinctively recognizing protection when it appeared. Outside, the rain had stopped. Seattle's streets gleamed black under streetlights, reflections painting everything twice. The man in the navy jacket was being loaded into a police car, his head forced down by a cop's hand, his expensive watch catching light as he disappeared into the backseat. Elena watched him go, this stranger who'd been planning to destroy her life, to take her daughter, to add them to a list of victims whose faces she'd probably seen on the news without ever imagining she'd nearly joined them. "You're safe now," Marcus said quietly. "Both of you." Elena nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Sophie leaned against her, exhausted, traumatized, but alive and whole and heading toward help instead of horror. The investigation would take months. Chen and his associates connected to a network spanning 3 states, dozens of potential victims identified through evidence seized from their vehicles and properties. Elena and Sophie would testify at multiple trials, would spend countless hours with counselors and prosecutors, would rebuild their sense of safety piece by careful piece. But that night, standing outside Meridian Gallery while Seattle's finest processed a crime scene that almost included her daughter, Elena felt something shift. Not relief exactly. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of understanding that they'd survived something that destroyed other families, that her split-second decision to run toward people instead of home had saved both their lives. Marcus's security team materialized around them, creating a corridor through the police activity, guiding them toward an SUV with tinted windows that looked like every other expensive vehicle in Seattle but probably wasn't. "Thank you," Elena managed. 2 words that couldn't possibly contain what she meant, what she felt, the magnitude of debt that had nothing to do with money or obligation and everything to do with the fact that her daughter was still hers. Marcus opened the SUV door, his expression carrying understanding that didn't need elaboration. "That's what friends are for. Even ones who haven't seen each other in 12 years. Sophie climbed into the back seat, her princess backpack clutched to her chest, her eyes already drooping with exhaustion that came after terror burned through. Elena slid in beside her, pulling her daughter close, breathing in the scent of rain and fear and child shampoo. Through the window, She watched Detective Kim conferring with other officers, watched crime scene techs photographing the spot where Chen had stood, watched Seattle continue its evening unaware that one more tragedy had been narrowly avoided. Marcus closed the door gently and walked around to the driver's seat, his phone still buzzing with updates from sources Elena couldn't identify, coordination continuing even though the immediate crisis had passed. The SUV pulled away from the curb, leaving the police lights and investigation behind, carrying them toward whatever came next. Safety, statements, the long process of healing from something that almost happened but didn't quite. Sophie's breathing evened out into sleep, the kind of deep unconsciousness that came after surviving things children shouldn't have to survive. Elena stroked her hair, watching Seattle pass by through tinted windows, thinking about college and architecture students and the strange paths that life took between then and now. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly. Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable in the dim light from the dashboard. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere with security that doesn't sleep. Somewhere you and Sophie can rest while the police do their work and my people make sure there are no loose ends." Elena nodded, letting her head fall back against the seat, letting herself believe for the first time in hours that maybe they really were safe, that the nightmare was over instead of just beginning. Outside, Seattle glittered like scattered jewels, the city continuing its evening unaware that one of its families had just escaped becoming another statistic, another heartbreak, another name on a missing persons list. Inside the SUV, Sophie slept against her mother's side, and Elena finally let herself cry.